Hello, welcome once again to Simple Groundwork and Diorama Techniques with me, your host, Bill Grigg. In the 5th episode of this show, we went and we started doing the shuttle. One thing that I neglected to tell you on this shuttle is, once you get all your enhancement done, you have to protect that enhancement. And how you do that is with a dull coat in a bottle. It's exactly what it's called. It's called dull coat. Now it comes in a bottle. This needs to be cut and airbrushed on. Or if you're brave, you could take a good wide flat brush, shake this up real good, and paint it on. You can see how the dull settles at the bottom, and it needs to be put up into the carrier. This is a lacquer-based product. You need to cut this and clean your brushes with lacquer thinner. It is a lacquer-based product. The reason you want a lacquer-based product is because it's a hard shell finish. A lot of people like that acrylic. You know, they put on, you do what you want. But in reality, you want a hard shell finish, and you can do it with lacquer. Or you can take a rattle can, which is in dull coat, shake the living crap out of the rattle can, and then you can spray that on. I don't like to do it with a rattle can when I'm on heavy enhancement, because a lot of times what happens with the heavy enhancement is the dull coat out of the rattle can will actually decrease the effect. So if you know you're going to do it with a rattle can, you need to heighten your effect on your piece. So in other words, you get to a point you say, oh, that's nice. Now you need to go darker because you're going to rattle can it. Whereas if you airbrush it, you can kind of keep your enhancement to where, yeah, that looks good, and then you can layer that on in light coats. So that's something that I had neglected to tell you, what I wanted to tell you folks about. You need to seal this all in so you can pick it up. Now, why did we enhance the shuttle? The shuttle was fine the way it was, but if you look at it, it becomes very toy-like. It's all white. It's got nothing to it. It's too stark. It looks like something you bought in your neighborhood department store. So the reason that you enhance, and part of the world of modeling is making a miniature of something that actually exists. That's why we're enhancing. We're taking the toy-like appearance of something, we're enhancing it, and it makes it seem real. That's the world of modeling. Taking something that exists in life, bringing it down into miniature, and enhancing it to that effect. So now, what I want to get into next here is all the tools that you'll need. Oh, they say, Bill, I'm a beginner. You know, you're talking some of these things, and I'm not getting it. What would I actually need to start being a model maker? What tools am I going to require? And that's what we're going to show you next. So what do we need, folks? Well, the most basic tool that we're going to need is, of course, a knife. You can't do anything without getting yourself a good hobby knife. And you can see I've got three different knives here. Now, why does he have 3 different knives? Well, you can see I've got a scalpel blade in this. I've got a number 11 blade in this. And I usually keep a number 10 blade in this. But right now, what I was doing is I was using one of these because I needed a really, really sharp tip to cut to a very precise cut. And this is kind of like my standard everyday use knife that I just have a number 11. And you can see that the fine tip is a little bit rounded, but I needed a really, really tight tip. Also, one thing I've done on my knife is I've added a little square piece of stock. So if I'm ever doing something, my knife will not roll off my desk and stab me in the foot. The 2 types of blades that I recommend using are number 11s and number 10s. Although there's all kinds of blade shapes. There's reverse curves. There's blades that have saw blades in them. There's all kinds of things. You just need to go to your local hobby shop or your local craft shop and go take a look at the various knife blades that you're going to use. But that is the number 1 essential tool that you will need. Now, the second most important tool that I feel you need is some sort of a cutting device. Now, these are just regular old wire cutters, and these, I believe they call them wire dikes. But you can see the tip is very pointy, and what the deal with this is one side is a flush cut and one side is an angle cut. So in other words, it goes down into the blade. Now the reason I use these is, I like this, and you notice when I go in, I'm not going to cut with the angle side, I'm going to cut with a flush cut. That's so I can go in against my piece, go in tight, tight, tight. Let me put on some glasses here so we can see what I'm doing. We go in tight against the piece, and we snip it. Now, why did I go in and snip with this? And I didn't take the piece and just break it off the tree. What happens a lot of times when you get an attachment point and you break it off, you'll take an actual chunk out of the actual model. Then that is going to require filling and sanding, and you want to keep that down to a minimum. Another reason that I cut is so I can make my life easier with certain cuts. Let's say I've got something that's, let's actually get a piece. We'll get a nice small piece here that's very difficult to take out. Right here is a great example. These two covers right here. They're awful small. To get in and cut's a little difficult. So what I would do is I would take my big cutter and I would actually cut this piece out. And that allows me now to take a knife, come over, hold the piece, and get in an angle cut with a knife. That's why I cut the sprue down lower. That's why you need these, so you can get in and cut. Also, a good trick right here is, we can see we've got a long expanse. We cut this. We cut this. And now I have a paint stirrer. So I'm kind of getting a double use out of taking all this plastic and just throwing it away. So let's actually cut a wing right off the sprue. We're using the dikes, the flat dikes, the wire dikes. Snip. Snip. And I don't know if you can get into the cut point, but you can't even really see it.
No, you can't.
You can't even really see it. So that's why you do that, and that's why you take your sprues and cut them way down when you got little pieces to take off. A lot of people say, well, boy, no, I'm not going to cut anything off the sprue. I paint on the sprue. Cut it out. Cut it out. Hey, that's a double entendre. Cut it out. Cut it off. Put it on something. Get a couple pieces of double stick masking tape or roll it over and then paint it on there. Get rid of that point. There's no need to go back in and touch something up. Also, a lot of times when you do that, the paint that goes on, let's say you mixed a shade of paint. Well, when you go in and do that little touch spot, that little spot's going to show if you don't get right in the ballpark of your mixed paint. Also, a lot of times when you touch something up, and even though it is in one shade of paint, we haven't taken this bottle and enhanced it at all. We've used it straight out of the bottle. But when we go in and we take that little touch, sometimes you'll have a little dot that looks exactly like that. It looks like a little dot. It looks like you made a mistake and you covered it up because you put your little dot in. So try to eliminate all that. And that is why we use two sets of cutters. Now the third thing that I feel you need to have is a good set of files. Now you can go out and you can find these. Sometimes you can find these in craft stores. Sometimes you can find them in hardware stores. Flea markets are a great place to get these at. But you're going to need some files, and the reason you need files are you're going to get the jobs that are just too heavy to do with sandpaper. You need to get in there with some beef. And as you can see, there's all different sizes, there's all different shapes. I have a tendency to use a round file if I have a contoured shape. Obviously, if you have a big wide flat file, you're on a flat surface. There's all different types of round files. There's some with points so you can get inside of things. There's all different sizes of flat files, all different widths of flat files. You can see this is a very, very tiny one. Good to get in a really, cramped spot. There's angled, there's triangle, there's And really what you need to do with these, I could go through all these files and say, okay, this is what you use this for, this is what you use that for. It's pretty much logical, guys. When you get down and you start to realize, oh, I need more beef than sandpaper, I need to go into a file, you'll be able to determine what shape is going to work best for the certain application that you're applying it to. So that's it. You go get yourself a good file set. Also, the cosmetic, I don't know what to call them. They're like cosmetic, like coffee stirrers, but they, for your fingernails and stuff. Those are good to use. The metal fingernail files are good to use. You can go through like a cosmetic section and find actually quite a lot of things in a cosmetic section that you actually could apply to modeling. But those big flat, kind of like a big oversized popsicle stick with the different grits on those. Those are great to use.
Emery board.
Emery board. Thank you, Dave. Emery boards. That's what they're called. They're great to use because a lot of times they get that polishing one for your fingernails, and that's a very, very fine grit. Obviously, you want to work from the more, what am I looking for? The rougher texture of a file down to the finer texture of a file. Same with sandpaper. We start out with like a 600, then we get up to an 800 and a 1,000 and 1,500, and the higher we go, the less grit we have. It's the same with files. You start with a rough file and you end up with a very smooth file, then you go into your sandpapers. So that's it on the files. Now, since we were talking about files and sanding type things, we might as well go right into sandpapers. Now, those of you that build in plastic, you need to stay within the automotive industry sandpapers. You don't want to go into the wood type sandpapers. Although I do sometimes, but I keep the grits way, way down. I'm not down. This happens to be 100 grit. This is that's 100 also, but you want to stay away from these. These are way too aggressive. They cause minute scratches in the plastic, which makes it very hard to fill and makes it very hard to get that minute scratch out. Also, you could be taking away a lot of detail using these things. So you go in with your automotive sandpapers. Now there's all different grades of automotive. You're going to go from, this is not labeled. This is a 320, and what we have is, you notice I have another bag here, and this is all my high grits. This probably goes from 320 up to like 2,000 or 3,000. There's also another product out there, I don't want to mention its name, but that gets way, way, way up in grit. That gets up into like 8,000, 10,000 grit. That's almost like sanding with a piece of paper. So there's sanding films, there's all types of stuff. One thing I've done is I have taken a self-adhesive sandpaper and I put it onto some of that pink foam. And the reason I do that, it's kind of like the emery board. It's soft, it contours the shapes, and it just makes it easier. And also, it gives me kind of a backing that when I go in and I need to really get some heft, I really need to sand with some heft. I did that. Another thing you can do is I took that self-adhesive sandpaper and I put it on a regular stick. And I did that because I really needed to get some leverage. And that's exactly what this does. This gives you a lot more leverage. It's like putting a lever in something, you can move it. It's the exact same process, exact same theory. But that's something else to be very aware of. Once you get above 600 in automotive sandpaper, stay wet. That's kind of important. You'll get a sludgy mix and stuff like that. You just keep cleaning it. You keep cleaning it. And a lot of times you can use that sludge to your advantage. But once you go above 600 grit in automotive sandpaper, keep it wet. Tweezers. Tweezers, tweezers, tweezers. Why does he have so many different types of tweezers? Well, there's all kinds of applications with tweezers. And this is probably going to suit your needs. Why do I need a tweezer with a bent end like this? Well, that's going to suit your own particular needs. But these are good for getting, like, if you're going into something, you go straight in and you need to go around, or you're inside a cockpit, you need to get down inside. You can see how is if you went in through an opening and you needed to, let's say, your rudder pedal was not in the correct position or something when you glued it in, you can actually see how I can go down into my cockpit, reach down into my rudder pedals and move them around. So that's that's that. Needle nose pliers, tweezers, very, very important to have yourself a good pair of needle nose pliers. You can see, like, I can pick up very small. Needle nose are used usually for applying very, very small parts, and there's all different kinds of those. I actually even took one set of tweezers, and I crazy glued some high grade automotive sandpaper on here with a rough grit, and kind of gave me a little bit more of a rougher surface to grab with. Also, I use a lot of tweezers. Like these have a post in between, so they're very precise. They come together very precise. What I like these for is, I like using these with decals. I take and I put my decal, I cut out my decal, drop it into my water, take this and put this down. We're going to do decals later on, folks, but that's another thing. But there's all different kinds of tweezers. There's all different kinds, and basically it's going to boil down to you saying, I need a tweezer that's got a round end with a widget in the end of it, because it's going to be your individual needs with tweezers. But one thing that you absolutely, absolutely have to have is a good pair of needle nose tweezers. You'll use these for everything. Straight edges. Always useful, always good to have. I like to use metal because it constantly has a good straight edge, where sometimes if you use wood it can warp on you or things like that. A square is not a bad thing to have, but I have found a square only useful when I am working in scratch building or wooden kits. I've never really used a square in a plastic kit other than maybe railroad buildings that I take, when I do the two corners of the railroad building, I take that, let me see if I can get this at a right angle so it makes sense to you, and I put the two edges in, and that way I know that the corner of my railroad building is very square. I use it a lot for that, but pretty much in plastic modeling I never really use a square. Not a bad tool. Another straight edge here. Now, it has a ball on the end. Why does it have a ball on the end? Well, it's got a little scriber that you push through with the ball. I doubt you're going to get that. If you can get that little point coming up and down, I doubt you're going to see that. But a little point comes out of that, and what the idea with this is for making circles. You would put this down, you would put a centering piece into it, and you take your ball, you push your ball down, and that's how you scribe your circles. So that's not a bad tool to have. But mostly this is all scratch building stuff. Mostly this is wooden kits, and mostly it's scratch building stuff. But a straight edge is probably a good thing to have. Now, let's just go into my tool chest and go through a few more things that I happen to use. Now you can see there's a lot of different stuff in here. All kinds of different things. And let's just kind of take them one at a time. Back in the old days, before we got proficient with airbrushes and things, we did a lot of our panel lines with inking. We just used regular old India ink and regular old inking pens. We'd go right into those recessed lines and we'd ink up our lines, but that's old school, and we stay away from that now. We stay away from that now. You can see I had different kinds of ink so I could do different widths of lines and things like that. But these are now dust collectors. I hardly ever use these. Here's an interesting little tool that you can make. I took a paintbrush, I drilled a hole into it, and I crazy glued a regular sewing needle tip into it. I've used this for so many different types of things you cannot believe. I used to use it as a scriber. Let's say I went across the top of my fuselage and I had engraved lines across the fuselage. Well, I'm getting rid of my seam down the middle of the fuselage, and I've kind of obliterated that panel line. I used to go in and scribe it with this. That was okay. But actually what you really want to buy is you want to buy an actual scriber. And the deal with an actual scriber is it actually takes out. Now, I don't know if you're going to get that, Dave. Maybe I should back that up with a little bit of color there. Can you get in tight in that scribe?
Yeah.
Now, the deal with this scribe is, unlike my point here, and I'll back that up again with that paper so you get a better contrast on it. What happens with this one is when you scribe with this one, it creates what they call troughing. And troughing is exactly that. It's just like when a farmer goes out and plows his field. The blade goes in, he cuts the row for the seed, and you get that mound of dirt on either side. That's called troughing. What this particular tool does is it does not trough. Unlike the farmer going in and taking and digging and getting two mounds of dirt on either side, this takes a small bit of plastic out. It actually removes the piece of plastic. So that's a good tool to have, because as you're going across and scribing your lines in, why have troughing? If you get troughing, you got to sand. It's not clean, it's not precise. So that's another good tool to use. What else have we got in our little chest? Old toothbrush. Millions of uses for this. Oh my God, I've used the toothbrush for so many things. One of the things that I really use it for is when I go in and I am sanding and I am filling in some of the recessed lines on the newer kits, I go in and I just rub it out as you get rid of your sanding residue. But man, you're going to use a toothbrush for all kinds of crazy things. Dividers. Outside dividers, go in, if you're scratch building, great to use. You can see they expand and they get smaller. But this is great when you're scratch building. A compass. I use the compass the same thing as I use these. I usually use these to measure distances. I usually do not use it as an actual compass. I don't really use that. I don't do a lot of that. Compass is not a bad thing to have, though. Another small compass. Oh, a very small square. Very small square. Oh, good item. Hemostats, I believe they call them hemostats. They lock in place. Good if you're going to hold a part and you need to get glue on, like a very small part. Great to hold it. You can put it in. You don't have to worry about holding nothing. They clamp. So you can see how you can use those. I've used these for a lot of things. The thing that I found about hemostats is to unlock them with a small part is a little difficult, where I'd be better off maybe in a tweezer. But you'll see the uses for this. Another type of divider. Believe it or not, this is a nail clipper. And I've used this so many times. Oh, I got a little piece of sprue sticking up, or I've done some grass work and my grass work is not even. I've gone in and clipped out with the clippers. This is a mic. You can mic things down. I never mic anything down unless I'm really building precision. I just don't mic things down. But some of you might need these, and if you've got one laying around, that's all well and good. Another type of, I believe they call this a compass. Good for a straight edge, good for curved lines. Don't really use this very much, but you can see it is in my toolbox. And one of my favorite little things is, believe it or not, this is the slide for a square. You can see where the ruler went through. Boom, 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 did the square. But what I use this for is the same thing as I used that other piece for. This is great. I put it down. If I'm doing railroad buildings, I put it down, and because it's higher, it gives me a little bit better to get very, very square. So, that's that box. That's that drawer. Let's take a look at my next drawer. What have we got in his next drawer? Oh, well, all kinds of stuff. Here are those emery boards I was telling you about. These are really great. I use these quite a bit. Oh, a metal file, again, out of the cosmetics. As you can see, another toothbrush. Another metal straight edge. Oh, several metal straight edges. Another metal file. Heavier files. These are probably wood files because they're very, very coarse. Oh, this is a neat little item. I have no idea what this is, but this is great because of the shape. I have no idea. Maybe there was a letter opener. I have not a clue what this thing was. But when I saw it, I said, oh, this would be great for applying my putties if I need a big, big, huge puttying job. That's real good. This is for cameras. Dust it. It's got a little squirty thing here. Personally, I think this should stay with the camera industry. It doesn't really have a lot of power. Riffler files. Different set of files. You can see these are curved head files. Never really used these a lot. But they were 99 cents somewhere, and I thought, well, you might as well have them. But I really never really use these very much. But you can see how it might be good if you get a good contour or a good shape or something like that to use. Those might come in handy. And also another set of files. So you can see there's all kinds of things. Here's something that, I don't know, you might want to use, you might not want to use. I would say this would be more for like people like the car guys or maybe radio control people. This is a small set of screwdrivers. Never really used them very much, but I remember back in the old days when I did build some cars, there were some bodies that you had 4 screws, and that attached up through the chassis, and I think it put your interior in, it screwed your interior in or something like that. But not being a car guy, I wouldn't know, but I hardly ever use these. This is something I use all the time. Saw sets, and you can see there's different teeth on the saws, and all this does is unscrew, your blade comes out, you stick in your other blade, and you just chuck it down and tighten it up. Here's another smaller blade. This is kind of a neat little item, but I hate to say this, and my pardons to the manufacturer, it doesn't work. But what this was designed to do was, this is designed to have a little suction cup in the end, and supposedly, I don't know, Dave, you want to follow me over? We'll see if we can do something with this. Supposedly, you were supposed to take this, squeeze the air out of it, stick it on the piece, let it go. Well, I'll be damned. This is the first time this has ever worked ever in my life. But that's what that's for. Well, you see, it doesn't really work. But that's not a bad little item. I've never really had much success with it, but I know people that swear by it. Another good piece, if you're doing photo etch brass, this is a photo etch brass bender. It's just like a big brake when you bend aluminum. So that's another thing to use. But that's pretty much it for tools, guys. And just get creative. With tools, I would say just get creative. Just start to look at things and say, oh, I could use this for this. I could use this for that. There's a paper punch. All kinds of crazy things. So I hope I've helped you stock your toolbox, and I hope that you have seen some of the items that I use here. And just like I say, get creative about your tools. And I'll see you on the next segment of Simple Groundwork and Diorama Techniques with me, your host, Bill Grigg. Thank you very much.